am the Graduation Requirements Program Administrator from the Department of Education. I manage that. I am working more to manage different pieces of work, including College Credit Plus, trying to become as much of an expert there as I can, and some other things. And included in graduation requirements is the requirement for students to have graduation plans. So that's something that I've been heading up work on. My background, I currently live in Central Ohio, in the Worthington area. I saw Neil was on the call. I came from Toledo originally and was a Teach for America Corps member in Dayton, Ohio. So that was, I taught elementary there. So if everybody could do me a favor, I know it says it on the screen, just in the chat, your name, your role, and then just a word to describe your thoughts on your almost complete first half of the year. And I'm sure many of you have had me, present at some point this year and have seen this. I've been asking this question at the beginning of every presentation because I feel a need to start every presentation with thank you. And this is kind of a way to wrap that up, is because everybody's words that come in, Neil, complex, and whirlwind, interesting, adventure, challenging, unknown. It's grateful, Jennifer. That's awesome to see. It's always a huge mix of different words to describe how folks are feeling, and how this school year is going. And I think that's really reflective of, one, obviously the year that we've had, but two, the work that all of you are doing. Is that it's a roller coaster. Some days it's easy, some days it's hard. I mean, doubt many days it's easy, but many days it's really hard. And you're doing a job that a year ago you never imagined you would be doing. And I can't say enough thank you to every single one of you for the commitment you've made to your students, to the commitment you've made to your fellow teachers, to your fellow administrators, because this is a lot. And the work that you're doing is incredibly important to ensure that students have as normal of a school year as they possibly can. Amber has a snow day. Oh man, I'm jealous of that. We got a little bit of snow here, but not enough for that. Pivot, pivot, pivot. Yep, that makes a lot of sense, Nicole. So thank you all, appreciate that. So today's agenda, I'm gonna talk through three things. First, I'm gonna quickly talk through the COVID-19 flexibility. And this was the course grade substitution flexibility. I know many of you probably know about this. You've seen our information doc on it. If you haven't seen that information document, it's linked at in a few slides here. I heavily encourage you to go look at that before sending questions along, because that document does a pretty good job of mapping everything out. But I want to touch on a few key points, touch on a few of the more common questions that we've been getting. And this is still one of the things that we're getting the most questions about. So I figured I'd offer an opportunity for folks to ask if necessary. Then I have some questions about the long-term high school graduation requirements, and a quick discussion point there around one specific part of those requirements that I just wanted to open the floor. At that point, highly okay with folks unmuting and discussing there, or you can do it in the chat and I'll let you know when that happens. And then we're going to talk through graduation plans. And I shared with Christine that I'm going to share with you an almost finished, I don't want to call it finished because I think this document's going to be constantly evolving, but graduation planning template that we've developed at the department that we wanted to share with you and give you an opportunity to look through. So I'm going to share my screen. I unfortunately I got the green light to share it yesterday, so I wasn't able to get it to Christine in time for her to be able to get it out. I asked her this morning, so we'll get that out to you after and ensure that you've got that, and that'll be posted on the website here soon. So that's kind of an overview of what we'll talk through today. So House Bill 164, which passed actually over the summer, it's definitely not recent at this point, allows you to substitute an eligible student's final course grade in an eligible course for the corresponding high school end of course examination. So basically, students that missed an opportunity to test last spring or summer because of the school building closure and the cancellation of testing, if they were scheduled to take or retake an exam, they get an opportunity to substitute their final course grade in that course for that end of course exam score. So basically this means that students that missed an opportunity to test don't at some point in the future have to go take that test. It's, you know, flexibility that was provided, and I think it makes a lot of sense, especially because there was no opportunity to test, and these students would have been testing now, and that's, you know, obviously quite a bit after when those courses would have finished, or when they were planning on retaking that exam. Just a note here, if a student didn't have a chance to take the exam last year, but still wants to take that in the future, using the course grade substitution doesn't mean that they can't do that. They can still, if they are not happy with the score that they got, or for some reason they really want to take that test to show what they are able to do, they are more than welcome to take that in the future administration of that test. It would just be that course grade substitution would be treated, you know, just like an opportunity to take the test. So, you know, you'll get multiple scores. If a student retakes an assessment 2-3 times, you'll have those 2 to 3 scores on the assessment. This flexibility would just be counted as one of those scores, assuming that the student was eligible. So what makes students eligible? Like we said, taking qualifying courses and scheduled to take the end of course examination for the first time in 1920, but didn't take the test because the administration of the exam was canceled. So this is students that were in Algebra 1 last year, were going to take Algebra 1 examination at the end of the year, but couldn't because it was canceled. That's this student. You know, maybe it was a junior who was taking American government. They were scheduled to take that exam at the end of the year. They are qualifying for this end of course or course grade substitution, excuse me. The other piece is students that were scheduled to retake an end of course exam. This may have you scratching your heads a little bit, or it had you scratching your heads at one point. Scheduled to retake. There's no statewide scheduling system for retaking exams. There's no place where you go in and announce to the Department of Ed, all right, these students are going to be taking these exams on this day. A lot of those scheduling systems are held locally. You make those determinations as to who exactly is going to take what tests. So that idea of scheduled to retake an end of course examination is based on your local records and knowledge. So as long as you can confidently say locally that yes, this student would have retaken this exam during one of those testing windows that was canceled and didn't get a chance to retake it, that student would also be eligible for course grade substitution. This does not mean that, you know, a student that wasn't scheduled to retake that exam, because it now benefits them, that they can use this course grade substitution. If they weren't scheduled to retake, this really doesn't apply to them, and they shouldn't be using this course grade substitution. It should be for students that were scheduled to take or retake an exam. And all of those course grade substitutions are done based on this grading scale. So you'll see that it aligns with our 5-point scale and our performance level indicators, which also align to the 5-point scale. It also aligns to competency. So you'll see that the mark for competency is that students need to get a C or higher on that final course grade to substitute it for a score of competent, and that would apply to the Algebra 1 or the ELA 2 and of course exams. Also with Algebra 1 integrated Math 1. I want to make sure I say either of those counts for the purposes of graduation. So we've had some questions there around that, around, you know, obviously if you think about it in terms of performance level indicators, competency is actually set at that basic level, but it's kind of between that basic and proficient mark. And when this legislation came out, it set competency at that C grade or higher in this case. This also applies to our seals. So the language in law is that a student needs to get a score of proficient or higher to earn the science seal, proficient or higher on both tests to earn the citizenship seal, or to earn the English proficiency portion of the seal of biliteracy. Students can be proficient in English Language Arts 2 or English Language Arts 1 and 2. This can apply to that as well. A student can apply a final course grade substitution to those seals as well. And I want to apologize. I just heard a dog barking downstairs. We're getting a stove delivered this morning, so you may hear some extracurricular noise downstairs, but hopefully it's not too loud. So just want to provide a time for questions. If there's something that I didn't touch on that you are still curious about, if there's something that you haven't heard about, this flexibility document here is the one that I've been referring to. This is our info doc that touches on course grade substitution. It maps out everything I just talked about and more in better detail. And these two go back to the original graduation flexibility that allowed students to graduate based on curriculum that has since expired. So, any questions? Christy, yeah, I can PDF this PowerPoint and give it to Christine. Adam, as far as I know, no, there's been no conversation of that. That exact grading scale was delivered in legislation. So if any change was to be made, it would have to come through in further legislation. That alignment was legislated. Grace, so in terms of the reporting mechanism for this, I am not sure exactly what score to put in. I do know that there is an EMIS mechanism, and I believe, and please don't quote me on this because I'm not an EMIS expert, there is a score not reported W code that's to be used for reporting this course grade substitution. I don't know if that helps you at all in terms of what score to report, but I believe that is the way that they're asking us to, or asking folks to report it. So Danielle, in terms of senior transfer students with 0 end of course tests, in terms of those students, there's information on the website for students that are transferring either from homeschool or out of state. If it was an Ohio private school and they did not, so I guess I'll ask a clarifying question. Was this a student that took either the Iowa or the Terra Nova at their school? Or is this a student that would not have tested in any of those? That may be one that it's helpful to shoot to me in an email just so I can understand exactly what you're talking about, Danielle. Yeah, see some folks talking through the okay, took SAT, no Iowa or Terra Nova. That is an interesting one. As far as I understand, I don't believe there is any specific flexibility there for those students, but I can take a look again and see, Danielle. I'm thinking this is probably one you've sent into the grad inbox that I need to touch on and address. So I will, if you haven't, if you could please just send that to me directly. I'll make sure that my email gets out to everybody. And if you'd send that to me directly, I can make sure to get to that for you. And McCall, adjustments for students who are on an IEP. I guess, is this a question in terms of the grading scale that we talked about, adjustments to that grading scale? I do know, that this is not just for students that are on an IEP, but I do know that this is accessible for, I meant this grading scale that we're referring to here. I do know that students who are taking the alternate assessment are able to use this course grade substitution, but if students with disabilities were taking the end of course assessments, they would use the same grading scale, the same conversion chart that you see here on screen. Thank you for everybody with the help with the EMIS stuff. I appreciate it. Yeah, Lisa, so now students actually that need to earn the seal of biliteracy only need so this year's sophomores and freshmen, students in the class of 2023 and beyond, where ELA 1 is no longer where ELA 1 is no longer a required end of course exam, those students only need to show proficiency in ELA 2. AJ, so the language in the legislation, so AJ is asking if you could do a course grade substitution from an English 3 course back to an English 2 end of course test. My initial response would be no, but simply because what it asks for in legislation is to use the, I believe, the course associated with that end of course exam. So I would assume that for most students, the course associated with the English 2 end of course exam would be an English 2 course or a course titled English 2. For this situation, it sounds like this would be a different course that wasn't necessarily associated with that English 2 end of course exam. If for some reason for this student, the English 3 course was what was associated with the English 2 end of course exam, that potentially could work, but that doesn't sound like that would be the course associated to me. Okay. I'm going to go ahead for the sake of time and to give folks time to talk through a couple more things. I'm going to go ahead and move on. But feel free, if you still have questions on this, we can touch on it later. This is definitely not off the table. So for Ohio's long-term graduation requirements, I think everybody at this point is aware of these. I'm not going to go into them in detail. There's one part that I especially want to touch on and speak to and talk through with you and kind of get some feedback from your end as to what we can do to help. But obviously, you know, we've got a little bit of a different structure. We have our course requirements and then 2 things that students need to do, where really the way that I've thought about it is they've had to follow one pathway after meeting their course requirements, whether that was 18 end of course points, whether that was 12 points of credentials and a 14 on work keys, you know, whatever that end of course or an end pathway was for that student, they had to do kind of like one pathway. Now they've got to do 2 routes. First being demonstrating competency and the second being demonstrating readiness, which is earning our 2 seals. I want to talk more today about competency and especially our competency alternatives. So competency on Ohio State tests, as we've mentioned already in the chat, and as I know folks know, is 684 on Algebra 1 and ELA 2. If students meet both of those tests with that score, they're good to go. They've shown competency via Ohio State tests. And I know that based on a lot of the research that the fine folks that I work with at the department did when setting that competency score, about 80% of students looking retroactively would have met that in most years. So that's about 80% of students that are getting that 684 on both, but that's 20% of students that are not. That will, you know, if they're going to graduate, that 20% of students will need to use our competency alternatives. And before they can access those competency alternatives, they have to receive remediation and retake that test. I often get the question, do students have to retest before they can start working toward a competency alternative? Basically, you know, if a student takes ELA 2 in their sophomore year, they don't complete that test, they retake that test at the end of their junior year. Essentially, if that student theoretically would need to wait until their senior year to start working toward a competency alternative. But thankfully, that is not the case. No, students do not need to wait until that retest to start working toward a competency alternative. I actually, you know, if you believe based on a student's first score that there's a chance or a good chance that they're not going to pass that test the second time and meet competency, absolutely start working them toward a competency alternative, because many of these aren't just going to happen like that. There are very few of them that can happen very quickly for a student. And you know, they're not things that a student can just dive into and immediately finish. There are options that are a lot more flexible that students can dig into later and can retroactively look at stuff. But I highly recommend, you know, even if that student hasn't retested, it's a good contingency plan to be thinking about and working toward a competency alternative. On that note, we'll talk a lot about graduation planning at the end. That's something that you would want to work with a student in that graduation planning process and say, hey, first score on this didn't come through at competency. This kind of says, all right, we may be at risk of not getting our diploma here based on this. Let's get a backup plan together. Let's plan on a competency alternative or a set of competency alternatives and start working there. And I think that's a really important move to make and a really important thought. So thinking through our competency alternatives, we've got 3 routes that students can take. First is military enlistment. And I have heard quite a bit on military enlistment that, this, just like our ELA 1 and Algebra 2 is tied to an assessment. It's tied to the ASVAB that students need to pass. And also, concern with, students going into the military or enlisting in the military that don't organically or naturally have an interest in enlisting in the military. Just because that is such a huge decision and a huge commitment to make, that's not something that we want to take lightly for a student. So that's a key thing to think about there is the weight of that decision, but also, considering that ASVAB and the requirement to meet a score on that test. College Credit Plus is a competency alternative. So students would need to earn college credit in a non-remedial math or English course for the subject area not passed. So essentially a student who they have gotten their competency score on math, they're good to go there, but they still need to meet it in English language arts. That student would be able to go ahead and meet the competency score or meet their competency alternative simply by earning college credit in an English course for the subject area that they didn't pass. So that's the relevant piece there. But in a similar way, there's a little bit of concern with getting eligibility for College Credit Plus based on the fact that students need to meet that eligibility score on a test. There's options there for students. There's obviously some flexibility right now for students and access to College Credit Plus. There are also innovative programs. So if this is a route that you'd be interested in going down, but you have concerns with students becoming eligible for College Credit Plus, I encourage you to look into an innovative program waiver. This could be an option for folks that are interested in getting some students into some College Credit Plus opportunities. I know, I believe there is a webinar coming up for folks that are interested in applying for an innovative program waiver. Christine, I can make sure I get that information to you about that webinar, but I just got an email about it from Becky Haar yesterday. So we'll make sure we get that information out, but that could be an option for you in terms of getting access to College Credit Plus for your students. The third piece in the place where I frankly think that a lot of students will end up needing to go is our career focused competency alternatives. So students need to do 2 of these 6 bullets that we see here. So there's 6 options here, and students need to do 2 of them. At least one of them has to come from these foundational options. So this is where our funnel is growing smaller and smaller and smaller in terms of where students need to go, and probably a lot of students will end up needing to go through here. So the options are getting a cumulative score of proficient or higher on web exams. That option is pretty much only for students that are in career technical programming. So if you don't have career tech options at your school, or students are not interested in going to a career center, that option is kind of off the table for them. Earning 12 points of approved industry recognized credentials. There's a lot more flexibility here in terms of what students, where students can access industry credentials, what credentials are available to students. It's not just for career tech students, but industry credential programs can't just pop up out of nowhere. There's definitely quite a bit of work that goes into ensuring students have access to those and ensuring that they're getting the education that they need around those. And then completing a pre-apprenticeship or an apprenticeship program. And getting a registered pre-apprenticeship is no simple task. We are working with the Department of Job and Family Services to support them in that program and to help build out what that process looks like for applying for and getting a registered pre-apprenticeship. But right now, we've heard that that's not, the easiest thing. There's a lot more opportunity in our supporting demonstrations, especially around the Ohio Means Jobs Readiness Seal. So many students who are able to complete a foundational demonstration should be fine. They likely will be able to get a supporting demonstration or potentially another foundational demonstration inherently if they're getting a pre-apprenticeship, because that would earn a student 12 points of industry credentials anyway. There's a lot of opportunities to kind of double dip with these and complete 2 opportunities. But what we've heard is that the access to these and the opportunity in them is not as great as we would like it to be. So this is a point that I just wanted to bring up for conversation, and I've seen quite a few folks coming through in the chat with I think some of the frustrations and the concerns that I've heard many a time, and that's kind of why I brought us here, is because I think this is a key conversation to have. So I feel free to sound off in the chat. Feel free to unmute if you want to talk through any of these. But I wanted to provide an opportunity for discussion and to see if anybody is having success in these areas, and if anybody has any tips for folks. If anybody has any specific concerns that they have that are a struggle, what pathways are currently available? What are you trying to do? What are you currently doing to open more pathways? And what can we do from a state perspective to make these competency alternatives more accessible? I hear you. There's definitely concern at this point, but we have been handed this menu of graduation requirements, and I'm not sure that we have an opportunity to add or subtract or change the menu unless some sort of legislation is passed. So this is kind of the menu that we're working with, and I'm willing to do anything I can to try to help support this. But I'd love to hear from folks. And yeah, Adam touching on College Credit Plus, students qualifying for College Credit Plus there. So Vicky, around the innovative program waiver. So College Credit Plus offers an opportunity, and I'm gonna probably botch this. And Christine, if you want to speak to the innovative program waiver, because I think you've been involved in it a little bit, feel free to, but I'll try. Because this is something that I am trying to get more comfortable with and know more about. That this waiver is for programs at schools that are wanting to offer College Credit Plus opportunities to students that have been historically underserved by College Credit Plus, and students that are not typically participating in the program, particularly, I believe, minority students. So what the innovative program waiver does is that it provides different requirements for participation and eligibility in College Credit Plus for students that are involved in that specific program, that allow them to use potentially their GPA or other multiple measures to show eligibility for that program. So it's not that they necessarily have to pass one of those eligibility assessments and earn that score. It's that they can use different measures to show eligibility for that. And then part of the program, and this kind of speaks to your point, Adam, about eligibility being one thing and passing the class being a whole nother, is that part of that is that you have to set up a program for how those students are going to be supported once they are in that innovative program, and ensure that they have resources that they need to help them pass the course. And Tisha, that makes sense as it being a plan B for students. Christina, in terms of, doing half on the competency on the assessments and half on the College Credit Plus alternative, that's specifically only for the College Credit Plus competency alternative. And that's for students that pass one test but aren't passing another. They can do one or the other. They can, if they pass math but they don't pass ELA for competency, they can earn College Credit Plus credit in just ELA. Or the opposite, if they don't pass both tests, then they would have to earn College Credit Plus credit in both ELA and math. So I hope that clears that up. Vicky, I completely hear you there, and that's a great point about students in rural districts struggling to meet these opportunities. It's hopefully they have access to career focused programming, maybe at their career center. But I think that what these requirements are likely asking us to do is to spread out that career focused programming and try to get more of that in schools. And I know that is not simply an easy task. That's not something that's, a quick to do. But that's part of why I'm bringing up this conversation, because I want to make sure that folks see that and see that, a lot of the opportunity really is in these career focused competency alternatives. And the more that we can do to build out these kind of opportunities, especially these foundational opportunities, the better off students are going to be. And Adam, that's a great point about, senior only programs for credentials. Currently, as far as I understand, you would need to apply for a CTE 26 to actually get a career tech 12-point credential program. But there are credentials out there that are available to students to do in 1 year. We can do a better job. And I think this is one thing that I've identified as a piece that I'm going to work with our Office of Career Tech on, is kind of identifying some pathways, some, bundles of credentials that could potentially work for students. Yeah, and Christy, thank you for that. There are definitely, options out there for 12-point credential programs, but, they're likely available at career centers right now. So Christina, if those students are taking web exams, that would qualify them. They don't necessarily need to be involved in a career tech program, but they would need to. It does say that they, and this isn't in my slide deck here. This is for Christina Shore, by the way. This is it does require 3 or more proficient scores on 3 or more web exams. So they would need to have a third web exam there, which is why it's usually for students that are in career tech programs, because those are 4 course pathways. Greg, great question about exemption. So we don't have a final, and this is just to clarify for everybody, the exemption of students with disabilities who have been exempted from the consequences of assessment on their IEP, Algebra 1 and ELA 2 currently would be the theoretical assessments that they'd be exempted from. So if a student is exempted from the consequences of assessment, our understanding at this point is that they would be exempted from the consequences of competency, but they would still have to earn 2 seals. That is not official. Unfortunately, the law wasn't exactly clear on this, so we've asked for some clarification. So we're hoping to know more. But that's kind of where we stand right now, is that theoretically the exemption would apply to competency. Students would still need to take those assessments, and then they would be exempted from that. Yeah, so Christine, that's absolutely right about entering an approved apprenticeship program after graduation, but that is specifically, and it says specifically in law, that would need to be for a program that requires a student to be 18 in order to participate in that apprenticeship program. So that would be the requirement there. And students, absolutely, if they have a letter stating that they, are scheduled to enter this apprenticeship program after graduation, and the apprenticeship program requires a student to be 18 or an adult to be 18 at that point to participate in the program, that would let a student participate in that program, and that would meet the apprenticeship competency alternative there. Ben, that's a really good point. And I currently am working with our English learners team at the department to try to work with that and provide more resources. But that's a really good point about undocumented immigrant students and the struggle there. So Alana asked, can you define the difference between 250 hours of work-based learning and pre-apprenticeship? So a work-based learning experience can be set up directly between a school and an employer. So there doesn't need to be any involvement of Job and Family Services or the Ohio State Apprenticeship Council in that conversation. And I know, Christine, you mentioned earlier in the chat that you've worked with folks, so thank you for calling that out. That's really a model that we're looking at as hopefully one that we can scale about the state as ESC is working and helping in that. But work-based learning experience can be set up between a district and an employer if the student is working there. And it can be set up on an individual basis with a district and an employer if a student has a job. They would essentially set up a work-based learning agreement that has evaluation statuses and would allow a student to build upon their learning and kind of set up some standards and some competencies that they're going to show in that experience. And that they would need to do 250 hours of that experience. A pre-apprenticeship program is a program that is set up, and it's usually a more sustained agreement between a school and an employer or a group of employers that would set up a pipeline for students to work in a pre-apprenticeship program. And Christine, if you have more to add, feel free to unmute and speak to this, because I know you can definitely help. But essentially, it would need to be approved through an application by the Department of Job and Family Services by way of the Ohio State Apprenticeship Council to be on the registered list and earn a student that. What did I miss?
Yeah, no, that's the biggest difference. The work-based learning is much more informal, where the pre-apprenticeship has to be a plan that's approved by the Department of Job and Family Services and then has to be monitored. And then that results in that 12-point industry pre-apprenticeship credential. And the only programs that are eligible for that pre-apprenticeship competency and the credential are the ones that are approved by the Department of Job and Family Services. So that's an important thing to know. And I am happy to talk with anyone who's interested in maybe thinking about pre-apprenticeships, about how to walk through that process and what that looks like and how you might be able to do that. And there are also some districts that are on the call that have done that would also be able to share with you how they went about creating their own pre-apprenticeship programs.
Can I ask a question? With the apprenticeship program, isn't it correct that the employer has to approve, and don't they have to apply to be into that program? Am I thinking wrong? I thought when I spoke with someone that they said that if the company was not already a member of the apprenticeship program, then they would have to join that.
So it depends on how you write your plan. Pre-apprenticeship programs are much more informal than apprenticeship programs.
Okay.
If you're looking for a full-fledged apprenticeship program, there are a lot more requirements, including a lot more lift on the side of the employer. For the pre-apprenticeship programs, the way that we've written ours is the ESC is actually acting as the sponsor, and we can add employers into the programs as needed, as long as they meet the requirements that we've outlined in our plan. So there are different ways that you can go about it, but the employer does have to follow the guidelines that are outlined in the pre-apprenticeship plan. And they also have to be willing to verify that the student has completed the work-based learning experience that's outlined in the pre-apprenticeship program, and basically sign off on the fact that they've learned the competencies that you've outlined in your plan.
Okay, thank you. I wasn't aware of that. Thanks, Christine.
Sure.
So I do want to move on because I know we've only got 15 minutes left. And first I want to say thank you to everybody for speaking up. And, you know, this is a ton of incredible information in the chat, and really, really helpful for me to see where your head is at, to know how we can support you. And I know this is frustrating and I know this is hard. A couple points that I'd like to make, and hopefully I'm not being the bad guy. But I want to point out, I know that this obviously does not, you know, align directly to our 18-point option, and we don't have our alternative options. We don't have our alternative options 1 and 2 anymore. But in terms of, you know, these 3 options that are available right now, we're really pretty close to what those options would be for students. So these really are, you know, you have a few more opportunities here and students have to do a couple more things. But there's quite a bit here that aligns with, you know, one thing that has been a key option for the past few years, which has been industry recognized credentials, whether it's a student earning 3 points or 12 points. And 12 points is a lot more than 3 points, obviously. But you know, obviously we've had to shift a little to build out those options. And I think what's going to have to happen is that we'll have to shift a little bit more to build out these options, because I see folks thinking in terms of, you know, students that are, you know, career tech students versus non-career tech students. And that's the way that we've thought for a long time, is that you either have students that are participating in career tech and going to the career center, or they're participating in career tech in the building, or you have students that aren't. And I think that the way that this is going to work is when that barrier gets broken down a little bit more, and those opportunities aren't as siloed into career tech programs, and that they're more built out throughout school buildings and throughout opportunities. And I saw, I think it was Jason, I think what you said is absolutely at the heart of it. And I think that's, you know, Adam agreed. Everyone's problem in a nutshell is that our struggle will be seniors who do not meet the testing requirements, are not interested in enrolling in the military, not eligible or interested in taking CCP courses, and too far beyond the career readiness web exams requirements. And I think that you're right, absolutely, on the first 2 points. If they're not interested in enrolling in the military, makes complete sense. If they're not eligible for College Credit Plus, absolutely. But I think that for students, the key is going to be not letting them get to their senior year to have them be too far beyond these opportunities. And I think that's where this is kind of a nice shift into graduation planning, which is where I want to touch on last, because these are things that can potentially be identified earlier for students, that you can say, you know, when a student takes that ELA 2, when they take that Algebra 1 test, all right, we're not sure they're going to meet competency. What kind of plan can we put together? And maybe it's, you know, multiple backup plans for students, you know, working toward these career focused competency alternatives. And maybe you're also working toward College Credit Plus. Maybe that's another piece that you're working toward. Or, you know, you have the student exploring an opportunity in the military, because maybe that could be the right thing for them. But, you know, I think that the key here is going to be thinking through, you know, what opportunities are available and thinking about them earlier. And Jason, I agree 100%. You know, especially for students who are moving in. And right now there's no flexibility for transfer students who are coming from outside of Ohio. These are the requirements that are there. We're hopeful that, you know, potentially we could see some flexibility come in, but that's another piece that we have not heard of in legislation, and we're hopeful that some sort of information on transfer students would come in. And yeah, I think that, you know, if there was some flexibility between these foundational and supporting, there could be more doors open, but these are the ways that things are set up right now. So just wanted to offer a conversation and talk through that. With 12 minutes left, I want to touch on graduation planning, and I'm going to stop sharing this, and I'm going to start sharing something else if I can.
And Graham, if you need some extra time, we can allot that too if you're available, because I know we had a lot of questions and a lot of discussion, so I want to make sure everybody has enough time to ask those. So
yeah, absolutely. Well, when we get to graduation planning, there's a few more discussion questions that I have. Excuse me. But I think really what's going to be valuable about this is you being able to send this out to folks, Christine, and people being able to look at it, because this template I think will be helpful for folks. All right, I'm going to try and share screen too. Let's see if this works. I just changed my setup recently, so it's all over the place, and I keep trying to make sure that I'm sharing the right thing and not something that I don't want to be sharing. Okay, so oh, never mind. All right, here is our graduation planning template. So this is something that we've been working on developing and getting some feedback on for the past few months here, and this is going to be posted to the website real soon. This is the template that we've built at the department. So you'll read here, and I don't need you to read it right now, but we are more than happy to share this with folks and for it to become yours. I heard as I was getting more and more feedback on this and getting some advice from counselors and administrators and the folks that'll actually be working with these graduation plans, that you can give us something, but for it to be useful for us, it has to become ours, which makes complete sense because these requirements look different at every school, and the processes and the ways that folks go about using it look different. And that's great. That's totally fine. And that's why when I took this to our leadership, I said, look, I'd love to post this, but if we're going to post it, we need to post it as an Excel document that people can manipulate and make their own. Because none of what's required here, none of what's in here is technically required in law. What law says is that you have to have a graduation plan that speaks to a student's pathway to graduation. And this is what I envisioned when I heard that, is exactly how a student's going to get to graduation and how they're going to meet those requirements. But that's something that, you know, looks different at every school. Jordan, great question about the student information system. So, you know, we have recently updated some reporting pieces, so there will be a little bit more information that'll be required to be reported through EMIS and hopefully integrated into student information systems. We are also working at the state level on a grant, and I don't want to overpromise and underdeliver here, but I'll let you know that our grant that we're working on, and this isn't definitely not something that's going to be immediate, but it's something that we're working toward, and as a part of that, we'd include quite a bit more of this information, especially in the ODEX system, and that would hopefully have that built out more in your student information systems. So this is hopefully going to be just your graduation plan. We are also working on updating the student success plan template so that aligns with this. But it starts with our basic information about a student and the date that it's updated. We had some suggestions to add a signature box here. We figured most folks would be using this electronically, so we weren't sure you needed to add a signature. But if that's something you want to add, feel free. Post high school goals. This is something that I think is really helpful to align everything that happens in this plan here. is thinking through, all right, what do you want to do after high school? And you're not committing to anything today. You're not committing to anything, you know, when you're developing this plan with the student as a freshman. But it's helpful to have this information here as a lens through which to view the rest of this, because I think that there's obviously a lot of chaos in these long-term graduation requirements. There's a lot there, but there's a lot of opportunity to point a student's high school career towards something after graduation. And I think of this graduation plan is a great way to center a student's high school career and to plan it based on what they'd like to do after. And I've seen some questions around SEALs, and you'll see at the end in this graduation planning document, we only have space to track 2 SEALs. And what Adam said is kind of, you know, my idea that I've been having as well, is that, you know, if a student wants to go above and beyond, great. It's, you know, maybe you determine that at your district, it's a counselor's responsibility to track 2 SEALs, make sure they meet that graduation requirement. And beyond that, a student can track that. And if they're choosing to, you know, do that next step, that next step can be on them, and it, you know, provides a little more responsibility for that student. These required credits are set up for the state minimum. You are more than welcome to edit this and make this yours. I also thought that another thing that would make this cool in Excel is that some people, I'm sure, so much smarter and Excel savvy than I am, will put some formulas in here to, you know, add up and show how this works and how this aligns. Then we've got our assessments. Just as a reminder, students do need to take all end of course assessments, so that reminder's here, and we've got all 6 of our assessments, and then places for substituting for science and social studies exams there. Then we've got our competency demonstration. You've got your first attempt and your second attempt, and also our remediation. So that you know what kind of support a student is getting. You made sure you've checked all of the boxes here before you move on to the competency alternative. And Danielle, as far as I understand, the law does not specify what number of SEALs need to be put on the diploma. What the law says is that SEALs do need to be on the diploma. So we understand that that's a lot. I think, you know, there's potential that that could change, and we are hearing a ton from schools and districts that that's a lot of SEALs on a diploma that doesn't have much room on it. So completely hear you there. I think that's something that could be a conversation, especially with our legislature moving forward. Neil, great question. As far as I understand, they just need to be noted on the transcript. The affixing is specifically for the diploma. But if that is not the case, I will let you know. You know, I think they could be noted on that diploma, and you could have a list of what SEALs are there, but I think that is the case. And Adam, in terms of diplomas, I would talk to your diploma vendors. 11 by 17. I think that'd be good for students. They'd be excited to be carrying that around and putting that on the wall. Competency alternatives here. We've got places to speak to all of these career-focused competency alternatives. Our military enlistment. We've got the scores for each ASVAB passing, and also for the form that they'd have to submit. And then also for College Credit Plus, the English and the math courses that students could be passing there with a little bit more information. Then we've got our SEALs. We mapped out all of the SEALs here. This is, you know, just to make sure that you know what the different options are for each of the SEALs, how they earn them. Got our state defined and our locally defined split up. And then how the student earned the SEAL for SEAL 1 and SEAL 2, and then additional SEALs earned. So this kind of aligns with what you said, Adam. That was a piece there. And in terms of geometry, as far as I understand, geometry will still be a required assessment. I don't believe that our folks at the department have announced that yet, but that is my understanding, that we will still be requiring geometry. And once we hear more, I will let you know. Greg, as far as I understand, no. In terms of the IEP exemption, students will be required to show or earn 2 seals by meeting those scores on the end of course tests. So the exemption wouldn't then automatically earn them the science and the science and American history and American government tests that they would need to earn those seals. And yeah, as far as I understand, integrated math 1 and 2 will still be around as well. There's no word that I've heard that those are going away and that we'll only have algebra 1 and 2. So questions about this graduation planning document or comments? Like I said, we'll be sending this out. And I want to share with the caveat, this could change slightly. It has not been through our communications team, so I have a feeling they'll want to pretty it up a little bit. But I don't expect any big changes to this. So when this does get announced in Ed Connection and put up on the website, I think we're also going to do a webinar specifically speaking to this graduation plan template. So that'll help. And that's when you'll see the final document, but I'm glad to give it to you at this point. And yes, Adam, competency and integrated 1, same score of 684. Neil, like I said, you'll get this from Christine after, and then it really depends on how our communications team works. But you can kind of move forward with this at this point, and if it changes slightly, it won't be anything crazy. So you'll be able to use this at least as a start to that. Yeah, so that's 10 o'clock. I have a couple questions. I'm going to stop sharing this screen and go back to the slide deck really quickly, just for a quick discussion. And hopefully this won't take too long. Oh, no,
that's fine. Like I said, if you need extra time, that's no problem. There was a question too from Brenda. Will there ever be a point that they'll need to upload a copy of the graduation plan into ODEX?
So as far as I understand, no, there shouldn't be a point. And I mean, that obviously could potentially change, and I would be wrong. But as far as I understand, that answer is no. There's no plan to specifically upload a graduation plan into ODEX. You'll just need to have those locally. I think that the hope is that we would have a lot of the information that would go into the graduation plan available in ODEX at some point. Exactly what that will look like, that's kind of the work of that grant that I referenced earlier, is trying to enhance ODEX, especially for transfer students, as we look at these more complicated graduation requirements and graduation plans. And that we try to include as much of that as possible. We're also, working with Ohio Means Jobs and potentially trying to create some integration there. But that's really in very, very early stages, and I'm not sure exactly where that would go and when any of that might be available. So I am going to move to a couple more slides. So if this is not what we'd like to talk through, that is totally fine. But I just want to talk through, for folks that have started to develop graduation plans for students, what's gone well, what's not, and how is it integrating with what you're already doing. So these are kind of like the what's happening right now questions. And then I've got a couple questions after this about moving forward. And I'll try to limit this to a few minutes, Christine, just to make sure that we're not dipping too much into anybody else's time. But I do appreciate you giving us.
Yeah, you're good. You're fine. We have plenty of time, so we'll make it work.
So Nicole, I would say that if students don't pass their end of course exams in Algebra 1 or English 2, College Credit Plus would be an opportunity for that competency alternative. What I kind of hear you saying is that that would automatically make them eligible for College Credit Plus, which is not the case. They would still need to meet eligibility requirements or be participating in an innovative program to get access to College Credit Plus. But that a College Credit Plus would be a way for them to alternatively show that competency for that subject area. Neil, thank you. That's awesome. I hope that this isn't too far off from what you had developed. Adam, do you mean the document that I just shared and change that to Algebra 1 or Integrated Math 1, or is there a different handout that you're referring to? Oh, okay, the one-page PDF. Got it. I'm more than happy to do that. We're kind of working on updating all of those right now, so that's a good note to have. Awesome. Beth, glad you like it. That sounds great. Yeah, one of my biggest fears as we were building this graduation plan document was that it was going to be too busy. But thankfully I heard a lot from counselors and from administrators that no, this is kind of exactly what we were imagining as well, which was nice. Awesome. Ashley. Yeah, and this, this Ashley could be a helpful piece there, because this will, in the near future, you'll need to have these for all students throughout your school. So it'll be a helpful piece to be able to plan out their credits in their freshman year, and then you'll be able to check back on that for the credit there. Nicole, I think that's a great question in terms of that College Credit Plus competency alternative. And I think that's part of the struggle that folks were talking about, was that, for many students, it'll be a bit of a struggle, aligning to a college course without meeting that assessment score. But I think, I won't put my head in the head of the legislature, but I think part of their idea was that, passing a course would not necessarily be assessment related, or not one big end of course assessment related. And for students that are, struggling with those end of course assessments, that might be part of the trouble. And Jennifer, no, you won't be required to use this. This is just trying to be a helpful resource. If you look at this and you say, nope, I'm not gonna use that, that is totally fine. And you are not offending me or, doing anything wrong at all. As long as you're happy with what you've got, feel free to ignore this. This is just meant to be a helpful resource. And Beth, that's entirely up to you. Whatever your plan is as to how to keep these graduation plans, I don't think that would hurt to be printing them out. But as far as you, whatever makes the most sense for you, if that's something that you think is more appropriate to keep electronically or appropriate to print out, totally fine. And Rosemary, that's a great question. So these graduation plans are required for all students. But exactly when is kind of up to you and your policy for identifying students at risk of not earning a diploma. So what is required in law is that all districts, as of this previous September 30th, have a policy in place and adopted by the school board or governing authority that identifies a policy for identifying students at risk of not earning a diploma. As a part of that policy, each student needs to have a graduation plan in place. And that graduation plan needs to be used as a factor in identifying who is at risk of not earning a diploma. There's more requirements that are included in that policy that talk about informing students when they're at risk, but there's a few boxes that policy needs to check that I'm betting that your district probably already has in place. And if not, that is something that was required by September 30. In terms of a timeline of when students need to have graduation plans, it doesn't say in law that all students need to have plans by this date. So I think that it is all dependent on your local policy and what that policy says, that process is going to be for students to have plans. What I have been thinking and what I've been telling folks is that as I think about this, these graduation plans came into play with the long-term graduation requirements. So it makes sense then that students that have to meet the long-term graduation requirements probably should also have graduation plans in place, because I think the legislature looked and said, hey, look at these graduation requirements. This is a lot. Let's develop some sort of planning tool that goes along with that, that would help students, plan for their graduation. So the way that I've thought about it is that students that are now sophomores and freshmen probably should have graduation plans in place sometime soon. And then as students filter in, they start to get plans in their freshman year and they're updated yearly. So that is a requirement in law that they're updated yearly. That's one of the only details that is in the graduation plan there. But that is a long answer to say we don't know exactly, and there is no exact answer for when they have to be required. Deborah, that's great. I'm glad you'd like to transition to ours. You'll have this document soon, like whenever Christine's able to send it out after this. And what in terms of when it's on the website, I'm kind of at the mercy of our communications team in that review process. So hopefully, I would love if it was up this week, but we will see. It's kind of a matter of making sure it's been through the final top level reviews. In terms of C tags, any changes to those competency alternatives would have to come through in legislation, Sarah. So I'm not sure about that. And Jordan, you'll have this document, which is almost final, real soon here. So you'll be able to use this and use this as a tool. I doubt much will change. That is going to change with this document. This is pretty set in stone at this point. The only things that might change might be visually with the document and some colors and things like that. Okay, so the next set of questions that I have is kind of me getting on my soapbox that I already got on earlier, is maximizing the value of grad plans and thinking through. This is a really great opportunity for students and a great opportunity for you to think through how students are going to meet these graduation requirements and to plan for that from the beginning. If you look back at the history of a student and you say, you know what, there's a chance that you might not meet the competency score. I don't think there's anything wrong with, creating a plan for a competency alternative with the student from the beginning and helping them through that and planning for that. And starting them on that path earlier in their high school career. There is, like I said, a lot of chaos and a lot of opportunity and different directions in these graduation requirements. But I also think that the more that we think beyond graduation, not thinking about graduation as a finish line that we need to check that box and then hand them over to who's next, but thinking through, all right, how can we sit with the student and take advantage of these really important and really valuable 4 years to give them tools in their toolbox, to put things on their tool belt so that when they do graduate, they feel prepared for whatever that next step is. And they feel like they're stepping through graduation towards something and not finishing and wondering what's next. And I think a graduation plan is a great opportunity to get students thinking about that from the beginning in the context of high school, because I know as somebody that got an English degree and was still thinking about what I wanted to do after graduation into my senior year of college, that it's scary to think about what the next step is. And especially for freshmen, sophomores in high school, that can be a scary conversation. But the more that you think about it and talk about it in a way that says, you know what, let's think about what you might want to do and try to get you experience in that now, the less scary that becomes, because students are experiencing it. They know what it's like to work because they've had work-based learning experiences. They know what it's like, on the job because they've, potentially earned an industry recognized credential in that field, and they get an idea of what that work actually is. And I think that graduation plans are a great way to couch all of that conversation, and also help you identify, you know, who needs a little bit more help and who might need, you know, a different pathway. So I'm going to, I know we've got a couple more last questions in the chat, but I'm gonna kind of stop here, and get an opportunity for any last questions. I've got a bunch of available resources in this document, and like I said, we're updating a lot of these coming soon. So keep an eye out for updated versions of some of these documents. But I want to say I appreciate everybody's time today. Thank you for talking through this. And yeah, appreciate that. Jennifer had a question about Algebra 1 and ELA 2. So the course grade substitution, that document is linked up further in this slide deck. But that speaks to, you know, students who missed tests last year in both testing windows that were canceled. So that would be, you know, you are eligible for students that missed an opportunity to test there. And, you know, there's a lot more caveats with that. They can use their course grades to substitute for any end of course exam, as long as they were scheduled to take or retake that exam. But for this year, that course grade substitution is not continued. So that is key there. So Adam, that's a great question about intervention programs for students. That is a great thing that I can bring back, and something that I can ask folks about. That's an awesome idea. I'm gonna write that down, and I'm not a good writer and talker, so give me 1 second. Yep, Beth, I would say on first glance, yes, you can use that grade. I would definitely look back at that information document to ensure that you've got all your I's dotted and T's crossed. Yeah, and Danielle, definitely hear you on end of course testing. As far as I know, no flexibility has been provided at this point. Just like everything else that would need to come through legislation. So we're watching that legislation and seeing if anything comes through. But as far as I know, there is no flexibility at this point. So we're still asking folks to test. I know there is a couple documents on the website that provide a little bit more information there, but that's what I've been sharing in terms of assessment. So Nicole, in terms of the document I'm referencing, yeah, so the link to the graduation flexibility document is right here, graduation flexibility 2021 and beyond. If you go to the reset restart page on the ODE website, that would be there. And Sherry, as far as I know, as far as I know, and this answers your question as well, Adam, as far as I know, no flexibility has been given for 2021, and we will keep an eye out. Just kidding, kinda. I appreciate you, Adam, and your humor. Okay, I'm gonna stop sharing, and I've gone a full 16 minutes over my time. So thank you, everyone. I appreciate, I'm looking over here when I've got my camera over here. Thank you, everyone. I appreciate your time. I appreciate you listening and answering questions and asking questions, because that's really helpful. I will make sure Christine sends out my email. Hopefully you've already got it, but make sure Christine sends out my email to everybody. If you need anything, let me know. But yeah, thanks y'all. Appreciate it.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Graham. I really appreciate it. If you have any additional questions for Graham that you did not get answered, I'll be sure to provide his email for you if you think of something later. And as Graham shared, I'll be sharing his PowerPoint and also the document that he shared, the template. So that will all be coming in a follow-up email, as well as the recording. So thanks again, Graham. I really appreciate it for you taking the time, because I know you're super busy.
No problem. I said it at the beginning, but I know we have people that have joined since. thank you all for the work that you're doing. It is so incredibly important and so incredibly hard and so very appreciated, at least at this household. And I know from everybody else at ODE, they would say the same thing. So hope everybody had a safe and healthy Thanksgiving, and we are pushing toward the home stretch toward a holiday break. So thank you all.
All right, thanks, Graham. Okay, so the next portion of our meeting that we want to do is really answering questions that you have that you wanted to bring to the forum. I got a lot of requests to allow some networking time. So I wanted to build that into our meeting before we have kind of our final share out. But I know there are a lot of questions that districts are struggling with right now that they just wanted to be able to bring to this forum to ask others and ask other districts how they're dealing with it, how they're doing it. So one of the questions that came up that I saw in our chat that we didn't really get a chance to address is just thinking about how are you integrating some of these graduation plans into your student information system? Are any of you using any kind of technology that you have found to be helpful? I wanted to give an opportunity for people to kind of share out what they're thinking, what they found, or any other questions that are kind of burning that you'd like to ask other people. Anybody want to share, or are you all still kind of struggling with that right now? I will share that a lot of districts are utilizing Naviance. They have Naviance as their career awareness system. And Naviance is working to create a way to track graduation seals, to put that graduation planning into the system as part of what the students do through Naviance. So that is in progress. They're also adding some work-based learning components to that. And then the idea behind that is, you know, students and parents already have access to Naviance. So that would meet that requirement of making it kind of a living document that students and parents could access. But I will say, you know, just from what I've seen on the Naviance side, that there is a lot of setup that has to happen on the front end to make that happen through Naviance. But the capability is there, and there are reports and tracking and all of that kind of thing. And I see that Scott from Westerville is using Transio. Scott, would you mind like unmuting yourself and just kind of sharing how that's going and what you think of it so far?
Well, good morning, everyone. And if Ann Baldwin is on here, she is invited to hop on as well because she's using it far more closely than I am. It's just a tool that a bunch of us got together, ourselves in Arlington and Worthington and Olentangy and Dublin, and as we were working on getting our seals together, and we started talking about grad plans. A couple of districts were thinking about Transio. We connected with them and have a 1-year deal with them to see how it's going, and they're in the process of getting our information, and we're looking at tracking our seals through Transio. And actually they have some pretty cool things that Naviance doesn't have, and could probably speak tighter to that. But you know, we just transitioned back to the remote. We don't know what we're going to be when we come back, and so we're still trying to figure out providing context for both students and teachers to be able to have them complete a quality grad plan. And we were thinking, we were kicking around ideas of maybe incorporating this into our registration process, which for us starts in late January, early February, so that as they start to schedule and register for classes next year, it formulates and fits with their grad plan. But I don't know. Ann, you still on? I don't know if she is or not.
Yeah, I'm still here. Yeah, we're still working with Transio to get everything mapped out, and that has taken some time because there are so many options for each seal, and then to map it with your data, we use power school. So it's taken some time to get those logistics connected, but I'm confident once we get those, we'll be able to hit the ground running. So we're looking at making the graduation plan a part of our scheduling process for the high school. So we're going to be working as a small work group with some counselors and administrators over this month to plan that out, to roll out probably at the end of January. So it's a work in progress.
Great, thank you. And I'm sure we would all love to hear how it goes once you actually get into Transio and see how it works. Because I know everyone is just kind of looking to see what tools might be available and what might be helpful. And Jen asked a question, is anyone using School Links? Has anybody tried that product or have explored that at all? All right. And I was wondering, Neil, a lot of people were interested in kind of your committee that you've put together at Worthington. Would you speak to that just a little bit about how you're doing that and what kind of work that particular committee is doing?
Sure. So in Worthington schools, we put together this year in the fall about a monthly meetings, and we've got a school counselor from each building, a principal or assistant principal from each building. Usually in the past, I forget certain groups of our students, like our EL students or our special ed students. And so this time I was able to purposefully include our coordinators that oversee those areas, our tech department early on into the conversations. And I even had told them that, you know, as we first talk to understand the grad requirements, it may feel like a waste of time for you to be a part of that, but just listening and being aware of it, because at some certain point, we got to just figure out how to automate this, you know, and it's good for us to know where these things come from. We're using the big, thick document to kind of help guide our work. But at the same time, we want to make sure that it's manageable and understandable to specifically Worthington schools. What classes do we offer in Worthington that meet those requirements, and how is our work flowing from, we use Infinite Campus, and we're involved with Delaware Career Center. So making sure that we've got a proper workflow. So that's kind of been our task. This meeting was a pivotal point for us to kind of say, let's take a look and hear what has to happen. And then we also knew to kind of like stay insulated. We know that our families are going through a lot of change, and our students are right now. So we just wanted to kind of like make sure we were on the same page with everything from an internal team standpoint. And then after today, we'll now start ramping up to make sure our counselors feel very clear about this, along with our principals. We want to make sure our middle school counselors and principals have some level of awareness of this information. So we'll be talking to them in early January. And then because of Zoom and our ability to do virtual, putting together a parent video that we'll be sharing out there, because once scheduling, I think, is going to happen, obviously starting in mid-January. I think families need to know kind of that context as they go into the scheduling process. Our school counselor, Brianna Abbott, who's on this call, was texting me this morning, and she said, we got to make sure, or I take it back, it was Emily Greenwald, our assistant principal, was saying, we've got to get our counselors into the classrooms, talking with kids and making sure they're aware of it. So, you know, just kind of keep talking as we keep talking through it. That's what this task force is it's an ability for us to come together, bring bright minds and kind of figure out what needs to happen.
Great, thanks, Neil, I appreciate that. So I wanted to offer the opportunity of other burning questions or things that you're struggling with that you would really like to bring to the group as a whole. Okay, well, if there are any, please put those in the chat. So one question is ideas for schools who can't afford programs, you know, because obviously there are costs to things like Transio and Naviance. Have any of you figured out a way that maybe you're going to track internally? I know some of you talked about spreadsheets that you were utilizing and some other internal kinds of tracking mechanisms. Anyone want to talk through that and how they might work to track that way? I can share some ideas that I've heard just being out in districts. I know a lot of districts have created kind of a tracking system similar to what Graham was sharing today as far as graduation plans. And then they're figuring out how they can integrate that into whatever their student information system is, whether that's PowerSchool or some of those other kinds of things, so that they can attach and kind of see, you know, how students are progressing. And I do know that a lot of the student information systems are working on that. They realize that's a need. But right now, a lot of districts are using Google Forms or spreadsheets or, you know, some kind of internal tracking system, and then doing what a lot of you spoke to, which is attaching that to the scheduling process and making that kind of the yearly update check. Because a lot of you already have a process in place where you meet with students yearly to talk through, you know, scheduling, and they're integrating that into that process. So that whole graduation plan discussion then becomes a part of that scheduling process. So again, trying to integrate it into processes that already exist, and thinking about how they can use internal tools to help them with that. Pre-apprenticeships, I can speak to that a little bit. There are some people on the call too that we have pre-apprenticeship programs with. One of those is with Worthington and Hilliard. That's through Worthington Industries. They had a course that they had built with Worthington Industries, where they actually had representatives from Worthington Industries coming in and teaching the course content. And then students were getting a work-based learning experience in Worthington Industries. So they had all of the components for a pre-apprenticeship program. They just hadn't like formally written that pre-apprenticeship plan and got it approved by the Ohio Department of Job and Family Services. So we helped them through that process. They had the curriculum pieces, they had the competencies in the curriculum, and they had the work-based learning piece. We just had to put that in a plan then and make sure that it was sent to the Department of Job and Family Services and approved. We also have several programs at Hamilton Local. They have a welding program. Again, they had a course where they were teaching virtual welding. They were already teaching a lot of the competencies that were outlined in the welding occupation. And then they had a local partner that really wanted to have students come in and work. So we were able to build a work-based learning experience for them that would meet the pre-apprenticeship competencies. Another one that we built is around culinary. A lot of you probably already have foods courses in your districts. So we took the competencies that are in the foods course that meets the food handler and some of those occupations, culinary occupations. And then we worked with City Barbecue, and City Barbecue actually is our workforce partner, but you could put any local restaurant in there as an example. We're working on childcare. We also have an IT program that we're building right now. So there are a lot of different ways that you can go about it. And again, you might have the pieces already in place. It's just a matter of taking those and formalizing them into a pre-apprenticeship plan. And I'd be happy to talk through with anybody about how that process works. I'd be happy to do that, or if you have questions. And maybe that could be a future topic for our Success Network meeting, is just talking through pre-apprenticeships and how to set that up. If that's of interest, we can definitely do that. Let's see. And then I see some conversation, mixed reviews on Naviance, which I hear a lot. So, okay, other questions or other burning things that you would like to ask? Okay, I do have one more opportunity that I wanted to share with you. And it is open to all districts in SST 7 or SST 11. that is completely free. And I'm going to put this up on the screen here. It's in collaboration with Graduation Alliance. And basically what it is just talking about how do we re-engage those students that are totally disengaged during the remote learning environment. I've heard this a lot from many of you, that you have students that are not logging in, that are not participating, that are not completing, and it's a grave concern. So Graduation Alliance has been doing remote learning with at-risk students for a very long time. So we were able to secure a grant that in partnership with Graduation Alliance, well, they'll provide training on different strategies, different ways to re-engage students. And it's not Graduation Alliance doing it for you. It's about them providing instruction and training on how to build your own capacity to be able to do some of the strategies that they've used and that worked well. So again, this is completely free for any counselors, social workers, administrators, teachers that are in the SST Region 7 or SST Region 11. Some of the sessions started already, but we're at the very beginning stages, so you can still join. You can still register to participate. And then of course, all of the sessions are recorded. So you are able to watch them later, because I know things are so crazy right now. It's hard to participate in any kind of training, but you would get all the resources, all the recordings, even the ones that have already occurred. We've only had a kickoff meeting, and then there's a session actually today that's starting. So if you're interested in that, I'm going to just put in the chat the link for that so that you can see that, and you can register, like I said, completely for free. So I'll paste that in there if you are interested in joining, and that's open to all districts and schools in those two regions. Okay, so we are at 10:30. So unless there are other questions, concerns, things that you want to bring to the forefront, I will share out all the information from today's session afterwards so that you have all of that. And then if you have additional questions, needs, or concerns, please feel free to email me. All right. Thanks, everyone. Thanks for joining us this morning. I really appreciate it. Have a great rest of your day.